Hey guys, tonight we are going to travel back to a time and place that feels both strangely distant and uncomfortably familiar. We're going to explore the life, the daily grind of a woman whose profession was one of the oldest in the world, but within a system that claimed to make it safe, the legalized, state-regulated brothel. It's a story that sounds like it should be about protection, but as you'll soon see, the lines between protection and possession get very blurry, very fast. If you were dropped into this world with your modern sensibilities, you'd probably get into a whole lot of trouble on day one just by speaking your mind. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support really does make these late night sessions possible. And while you're at it, I'd love to see where you're listening from. Drop your city and the current time in the comments below. It's always cool to see how this little community spans across the globe in through all hours of the night. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into 2 nights journey together. The journey ends with a final, bone-jarring lurch of the cart. For days this has been your world, the rhythmic squeak of the axle, the smell of damp hay, and the monotonous grey-brown landscape of the countryside rolling by. But now that's all over. The carter, a man whose face is a roadmap of dirt and indifference, grunts something that might be where he gestures with his thumb. You clamber down, your legs stiff and clumsy, and your worn leather shoes immediately sink into a thick, clinging mud that seems to be the city's official welcome mat. The first thing that hits you isn't a sight, but a sound. A constant, overwhelming roar. It's a symphony of chaos, the clatter of wooden wheels on cobblestones, the shouting of merchants, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. And underneath it all, a hum of thousands of voices talking, arguing, laughing, and crying. You've never heard anything so loud. Back in your village, the loudest sound was the church bell on a Sunday. The church bells are just one more instrument lost in the orchestra. Then comes the smell. It's a complex, layered assault on your senses. There's the earthy scent of wet soil and horse manure, mixed with the tempting aroma of baking bread from a nearby shop. But woven through, it is something sharper, more industrial. The acrid tang of coal smoke hangs in the air, and from a narrow alleyway drifts a deeply unpleasant, ammonia-like stench. You'll later learn this is the dyer's district, where they use vats of aged urine to fix colors into fabric, a bizarre, yet common bit of city chemistry that you quickly learn to navigate by scent alone. You clutch the small, cloth-wrapped bundle that holds everything you own: a change of clothes, a small wooden comb, and the 3 precious coins you've saved your entire life for. This is it. The place you've dreamed of for months. The place a cousin's letter promised was filled with opportunities for a girl who can sew a straight seam. You look up, and the buildings seem to lean in towards each other, their timber-framed upper floors jutting out over the narrow street, almost blocking out the sky. It feels less like a city of hope and more like a maze with stone walls. The first few days are a blur of walking. You search for the address from the letter, only to find the building houses a loud, chaotic tavern, and no one has ever heard of your cousin. They probably moved on months ago. Or maybe they were never here at all. Every door you knock on asking for work as a laundress, a scullery maid, or a seamstress, you're met with a shake of the head. There are 100 other girls, just like you, who arrived last week with the exact same hope. The city is overflowing with them. This is a well-documented pattern in many historical periods, a mass migration from the countryside, creating a huge vulnerable population in urban centers. You quickly learn the brutal economics of your new reality. One of your precious coins goes to a week's rent for a spot on a straw-strewn floor in an attic, a space you share with 4 other women whose coughing provides a constant soundtrack to your sleepless nights. Another half coin is gone in 3 days, spent on stale bread and watery soup. The dream of independence begins to curdle into annoying cold fear. Historians still debate the primary motivations for women like you. Were you pushed from the countryside by poverty and famine? Or were you pulled to the city by the promise of freedom and a life of your own choosing as you sit on your pathetic straw bed, listening to the city rumble outside? You realize it was a bit of both. You were pushed by desperation, and now you're repelled by the terrifying gravity of having nowhere else to go. The freedom you craved feels an awful lot like being completely and utterly alone. And as your last coin begins to feel lighter in your pocket, you know a choice has to be made, and soon. The city air grows colder as the sun dips below the rooftops, painting the sliver of visible sky in hues of bruised purple and grey. Your stomach is no longer just rumbling, it's a tight, aching knot of emptiness. You spent the day trying to sell. The only thing of value, you have left your mother's small, tarnished silver locket. But the merchants you approached either waved you away with disdain or offered a price so insulting it felt like a slap. It was the last tangible piece of your old life. Defeated, you huddle near a public fountain, not for the water, but for the relative anonymity of the crowd. You watch women in fine dresses pass by, their servants trailing behind, and you feel utterly invisible. It is in this moment of quiet desperation that a woman stops in front of you. You didn't even hear her approach. She is perhaps in her 40s with a face that is neither kind nor cruel, but simply observant, just not dressed in the flamboyant silks of the wealthy, but her dark-wool dress is clean, well mended, and fits her imposing frame perfectly. A large ring of iron keys hangs from a leather belt at her waist, jingling softly as she moves. This collection of keys is a subtle but powerful symbol. In this era, keys meant control, access, and authority over a household. Her possessing so many marks her as a person of significant domestic power. "You look lost, child," she says. Her voice is low and even without a trace of pity. It's a statement of fact. You flinch, expecting her to shoo you away, but she doesn't move. Her eyes, the color of slate, take in your worn-out shoes, your thin shawl, and the hunger etched onto your face, new to the city. You can only manage a small, shaky nod. "It's a difficult place for those without a foothold," she continues, her gaze unwavering. "A warm bed is not a guarantee. Neither is a hot meal." She knows, she's not guessing. She's diagnosing your situation with the precision of a physician. "I am Madame Melody. I run a respectable house under the city's protection. My girls are safe, fed, and sheltered from the dangers of the street." The words respectable house and girls hang in the air. You know, on some level, what she is implying. You've heard whispers back in the village about such places in the city, spoken of with a mixture of horror and morbid curiosity. But the way she says it so businesslike, so calm, strips the idea of its sordid, back-alley character. She makes it sound like an apprenticeship, a trade. Historians often argue about the true nature of women like her. Was she a predator, plain and simple, preying on the most vulnerable, or did she, in her own twisted way, see herself as a rescuer, offering a grim alternative to the even grimmer fate of starvation or violent crime on the streets? Did she see herself as a legitimate businesswoman, operating within the city's new, supposedly enlightened regulations from your vantage point on the cold stone? Her offer sounds less like a temptation and more like a lifeline. "My girls are looked after," she says, her tone softening just a fraction. "They have pretty clear good food. They lack for nothing. All I ask in return is their gratitude and their cooperation." The word cooperation is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. You look down at your hands, at the locket you culled and sell. You think of the attic, of the coughing women, of the gnawing ache in your belly. The choice isn't between virtue and sin. It never was. The choice is between this woman's offering a slow, miserable disappearance. You think, just for a little while, just until I can save some money and find a real job, just to get on my feet. It's a bargain you make with yourself, a desperate piece of self-deception. You look up at her and give another small nod, this one more decisive. A flicker of something satisfaction perhaps crosses her face so quickly you almost miss it. "A wise decision," she says, her voice returning to its brisk, professional tone. "Come. The evening meal will be served soon." She turns, and you rise on unsteady legs to follow her. The jingle of her keys seems to be the only sound in the world, as she leads you away from the bustling square and into a quieter, narrower street. You feel the eyes of passers-by on your back, and you can't tell if it's your imagination, or if they know exactly who this woman is and where you are going. With every step, you feel as though you are walking through a doorway that you will never be able to find again from the other side. The first gate of the cage has just swung shut behind you, not with a clang, but with the soft, almost silent click of a well-oiled lock. Madame Melody leads you through a labyrinth of winding streets. As you walk, the character of the neighborhood subtly changes. The shops become less about daily necessities like bread and tools, and more about luxuries and leisure. You pass a tavern with music spilling out, its windows glowing warmly, and then a shop selling expensive-looking fabrics. The air itself seems to change, growing heavy with the scent of cheap perfume, spilled wine, and something else, a kind of cloying, artificial sweetness meant to mask the city's underlying grime. Finally, she stops before a tall, narrow house, indistinguishable from its neighbors except for one detail: a single, unlit reed lantern hanging by the heavy oak door. It's a discreet symbol, not the garish, glowing sign you might imagine. In many cities, these markers were mandated by law, a way for the authorities to easily identify and monitor these establishments. The color red, for reasons that historians still puzzle over, has been associated with this trade across different cultures and centuries. Was it for its visibility, its association with passion, or sin? The debate is ongoing, but for you, it's simply the sign that you've arrived. Madame Melody uses one of her many keys to unlock the door. Its wings open into a dimly lit foyer. The noise from the street is instantly muffled, replaced by a low murmur of voices and the faint, melancholic tucking of a lute from an upper room. The house is warmer than you've been in weeks. A fire crackles in a large hearth just beyond the entryway, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The main room is furnished better than any you've ever seen. There are several small tables with chairs, a few cushioned benches along the walls, and a threadbare but still beautiful tapestry depicting a hunting scene. It's clean, but in a way that feels impersonal. It's the cleanliness of an inn, not a home. Everything is arranged for function, for the smooth flow of guests and residents. A man in a gentleman's coat sits at one table, nursing a cup of wine, his eyes lingering on you for a moment before flicking away. H.E.S. a client, you realize with a jolt. A few other women are present, draped on the benches or walking through the room. They are dressed in a way that is both modest and suggestive. Their dresses have high necklines, as was the fashion. But the fabric is a bit too thin, the fit a bit too tight across the bodice. Their hair is elaborately styled, and their faces are painted with a subtle layer of powder and rouge. They look at you as you ranging from mild curiosity to outright weariness. There's no welcome in their eyes, only assessment. You are new competition. This is our newest girl, Madame Melody announces to the room, her hand resting on your shoulder with a grip that feels more like ownership than reassurance. She will be joining our little family. The word family sounds absurd in this context. It's a deliberate choice of word, a common tactic used by madams and pimps throughout history to foster a sense of codependency and loyalty. By framing the brothel as a family, they could discourage women from leaving and creating us against the world mentality. One of the women, a redhead with tired eyes, gives you a small, cynical smile. Another sparrow fallen from the nest. She mutters to her companion, just loud enough for you to hear. The name sticks in your mind: a sparrow. Small, common, and easily broken. Madame Melody ignores her. Magda, she calls out, and the redhead sighs and pushes herself off the bench. Show our new friend to the dormitory and find her something suitable to wear. And make sure she washes, thoroughly. The last word is emphasized, a clear order. Magda gestures for you to follow, her movements languid and disinterested. She leads you up a narrow, winding staircase. The air grows warmer and stuffier with each step. The smell of perfume is stronger up here, mixed with the faint, unpleasant odor of stale sweat and unwashed bodies. She pushes open a door at the end of a short hallway, revealing a long, narrow room packed with beds. There are at least 6 of them, simple wooden frames with thin mattresses, crammed so close together you could reach out and touch the person in the next bed. This is the dormitory. This is where the family sleeps. A few of the beds are occupied by sleeping women, their rest a brief respite in a cycle of long nights and weary days. Magda points to an empty bed in the corner. That's yours. She then opens a large wooden chest at the foot of her own bed and pulls out a dress. It's a deep green color, the fabric coarse but clean. This was Mary's, she says flatly. She left last week. The pause before left tells you everything you need to know. People didn't just leave this place. The washroom is at the end of the hall, she says, her voice devoid of emotion. The water is cold. She turns to leave, then hesitates. She looks at you, really looks at you, for the first time. For a second, you see a flicker of something that might be pity in her eyes. Listen, new girl, keep your head down. Do what you're told. And don't ever, ever believe the promises. Not from Madame, and especially not from them. She jerks her head towards the downstairs room. They're not here to save you. With that, she's gone, leaving you alone in the dim, crowded room, clutching a dead woman's dress. The house is a paradox. It is a place of intimacy that feels utterly impersonal, a home that is just a workplace, and a shelter that is, you are beginning to understand, a very well-appointed prison. The next morning, you are woken not by the sun, for very little of it penetrates the grimy dormitory window, but by the sharp, authoritative clap of Madame Melody's hands. The air is stale and thick with the scent of sleep. You sit up, your body aching from the unfamiliar mattress, and see that the other women are already stirring, their movements slow and mechanical, like puppets being roused by their master. There is no gentle awakening here, only a summons. Up, all of you, Madame Melody says, her voice cutting through the morning quiet. The day doesn't wait. She scans the room, and her eyes land on you. You, the new one. Get dressed. You're coming with me. You quickly pull on the green dress Magda gave you. It feels strange, like wearing a costume. It doesn't fit you quite right. A little too loose in the waist. A little too tight in the shoulders. A constant reminder that it belonged to someone else. You follow Madame Melody down the stairs and out the front door. Blinking as the morning light, pale and watery as it is, assaults your eyes. The city is already wide awake, the streets teeming with carts, merchants, and laborers starting their day. Your destination is a stern, imposing stone building a few blocks away, the city hall. It's a place of power, its architecture designed to intimidate and impress upon all who enter the authority of the municipal government. This trip is not a choice. It's a legal requirement. In many cities that legalized unregulated prostitution, one of the first and most critical steps was the creation of a formal registry. This was the system's foundation. You are led through a side entrance, away from the main hall where respectable citizens conduct their business, and into a small, drab office. The room smells of dust, old paper, and sealing wax. A sallow-faced clerk with ink-stained fingers sits behind a high desk, looking down at you with an air of profound boredom. He has seen hundreds of girls just like you. To him, this is just another Tuesday. Name, he asks, his voice a monotone drone. You hesitate. Do you give your real name, the name your mother gave you? It feels like surrendering the last piece of yourself. Before you can answer, Madame Melody speaks for you. Analyze, she says, the name sounding foreign and artificial. She has already decided who you will be. This practice of assigning new names was common. It served a dual purpose. It created a professional persona, separating the working woman from her private self, and it further severed ties to her past, making it harder for family to find her, or for her to ever truly go back. The clerk dips his quill into an inkpot and scratches the name Analyze into a massive, leather-bound ledger that lies open on his desk. The book is filled with names, hundreds of them, each one a woman's life reduced to a single line of ink. Age, the clerk asks, not looking up. 19, Madame Melody answers for you again. You are 17, but she has aged you up, likely to meet some legal requirement or to make you seem more appealing to clientele. He scribbles again. Place of origin. From the countryside, she says vaguely, offering no specifics. Anonymity is part of the package. The clerk then looks directly at you. Physical description. For the record, he scans you with a detached, clinical gaze, like a farmer assessing livestock. Height average, hair brown, eyes brown, eyes brown. No distinguishing marks. He scribbles it all down. In that moment, you cease to be a person and become a collection of physical attributes, an entry in a catalogue. This ledger was the city's to love control. It transformed these women from a perceived social problem into a manageable, taxable resource. With your name in this book, you are now officially a part of the system. You are, in the eyes of the law, a public woman. The historical implications of this are staggering. It meant you had forfeited certain rights. Your movements could be legally restricted, your body subject to mandatory inspections, and your earnings taxed. Historians continue to debate whether the system offered any genuine protection, or if it was purely a mechanism of social and economic control. The evidence from ledgers like this one suggests that control was, at the very least, a primary objective. As a strange, and somewhat sad footnote to this process, some of these very ledgers have survived and are now invaluable resources for social historians. They provide rare data on the age, origin, and even the literacy level. Sometimes women were asked to sign their own names of these otherwise invisible populations. The very tool used to control you in your time has become a window for understanding your world centuries later. The clerk blows on the ink to dry it, then sprinkles it with sand from a small shaker before tipping the sand away. She is registered, he announces, closing the book with a heavy thud that echoes in the small room. The sound feels unnervously final. Madame Melody places a few coins on the desk, the registration fee. You realize with a sickening lurch that you are already in her debt. She paid for your entry into this life, and it's a debt she will never let you forget. As she leads you out of the city hall and back into the anonymous bustle of the street, you feel fundamentally changed. An invisible brand has been placed upon you. Your name is no longer your own, and your body is now, officially, public property, logged and categorized in a book you will never be allowed to see. You belong to the city now, and to Madame Melody. When you return to the house, the atmosphere is different. The morning's sleepy languor has been replaced by a quiet but purposeful industry. Some of the women are mending dresses, others are helping in the kitchen, their laughter sounding a little too loud, a little too forced. It's all part of the performance of a well-run, happy household. Madame Melody leads you not to the dormitory, but to a small storage room at the back of the ground floor. The room is crammed with bolts of fabric, boxes of ribbon, and a rack of dresses in various states of repair. She rummages through a large wooden rug in the corner, the scent of lavender and mothballs wafting out as she lifts the heavy lid. After a moment, she pulls out a small, neatly folded bundle of cloth and hands it to you. Here, she says, this is yours now. You will wear it whenever you're outside this house. You unfold the bundle. It's a simple yellow shawl made of a coarse, cheap wool dyed a jarringly bright canary yellow. It's not a color you would ever choose. It's the color of sickness, of quarantine flags, of things that should be avoided. You look at it, confused. It's the law, Madame Melody says, her voice leaving no room for argument. It marks you. It tells the guards who you are, and it tells the respectable folk to keep their distance. This was a real and common practice in many European cities during this period. The identifying garment was another layer of control, a visible symbol of the woman's registered status. The specific item and color varied from city to city. It might be a yellow shawl, a striped hood, a red ribbon tied around the arm, or even a specific style of shoe. The purpose, however, was universal: to make these women instantly recognizable, to visually segregate them from the rest of society, a walking billboard announcing their profession. You finger the rough fabric of the shawl. To be forced to wear this feels like a profound humiliation. It's one thing to be registered in a secret ledger in a dusty office. It strips you of all anonymity, making you a public spectacle. You can no longer just be a woman walking through the market, you are now that kind of woman. This visual marking had a bizarre and cruel side effect. While it was intended to keep decent people away, it also acted as an advertisement for potential clients. It made the women easier to find for men seeking their services. Thus, the very thing meant to enforce their separation also reinforced their separation within the city's economy of desire. This paradox was likely not lost on the city officials who drafted these laws. As a strange, almost absurd bit of historical trivia, enforcement of these clothing laws could be incredibly specific. Some city ordinances dictated the exact shade of yellow, the width of a stripe, or how the item had to be worn. There are records of women being fined or punished for not displaying their mark prominently enough, It's a level of bureaucratic pedantry that is almost comical in its cruelty. All the girls wear them, Madame Melody continues, her tone softening slightly, as if sensing your resistance. She's using a classic manipulation tactic, normalizing the degrading. It is for your own protection, you see. This way, there are no misunderstandings. A man cannot claim he thought you were a lady of quality. The law is clear, and it protects you from false accusation. Her argument, on the surface, has a twisted kind of logic. In a world where a woman's reputation was everything, and a false accusation of soliciting could ruin an innocent woman, this mark did, in theory, draw a clear line. But who was it really protecting? Historians are deeply divided on this. Some argue that these laws did offer a sliver of legal protection, creating a clear-cut category that prevented some forms of harassment. Others argue forcefully that this is a complete misreading of the intent, that these laws were never about protecting the women, but about protecting the social order and the male citizenry. By marking these women, the system contained and controlled a perceived threat to public morality, turning them into a clearly defined, manageable underclass. You look from the yellow shawl back to Madame Melody's impassive face. You understand that this isn't a request. It's an order, backed by the full weight of the city's law and her own absolute authority within these walls. To refuse would be an act of rebellion you cannot afford. Slowly you drape the shawl over your shoulders. The cheap wool is scratchy against your skin. You catch your reflection in a shard of a broken mirror leaning against the wall. The bright, ugly yellow clashes horribly with the green of your dress. It changes your entire appearance. You no longer look like yourself. You look like what they'd decided you are. A girl in a yellow shawl. A public woman. Your first official day inside the house unfolds like a strange, disorienting play where you are the only one who has to read the script. The morning and early afternoon are dedicated to chores. You are put to work alongside two other women, scrubbing the main room's wooden floor, and these ache and your knuckles are raw. The goal isn't just cleanliness, it's a form of busy work, a way for Madame Melody to keep everyone occupied and out of trouble during the slow daylight hours. There is no idle time here. Every moment is structured, managed. Around mid-afternoon, the house begins its transformation. The shutters are closed, plunging the rooms into a perpetual twilight lit by candles and the glow of the hearth. The smell of beeswax and polish mingles with the scent of a savory stew simmering in the kitchen. The evening meal, which will be served to the women before the first guests arrive. It's a hearty, filling meal, better than any food you've had in weeks. This is a crucial part of Madame Melody's system of control, providing basic comfort. Good food and a warm bed are powerful tools for ensuring compliance, when they are the only comforts one has. After the meal, the real preparation begins. You watch as the other women ascend the stairs to the dormitory and return transformed. They emerge wearing their evening attire. These aren't gaudy or overly revealing clothes, but dresses made of finer fabrics, dyed cottons, perhaps a touch of silk or velvet for the more favored women. The colors are richer, the cuts more flattering. Their faces are carefully painted with cosmetics. White lead powder to smooth the skin, the touch of carmine on the cheeks and lips, a fact that was likely known but ignored. The pursuit of the fashionable ideal of beauty, a pale, smooth complexion with a rosy blush, took precedence over long-term health. A bizarre and sad detail is that some of these lead-based powders could, over time, cause skin lesions and scarring, creating a vicious cycle where more makeup was needed to hide the damage caused by the makeup itself. Magda, the redhead who spoke to you on your first night, takes you aside. Her earlier cynicism has been replaced by a weary pragmatism. "All right, new girl," she says, looking you up and down. "First things first, you don't talk unless you're spoken to." You smile. Even if a man has the face of a gargoyle and the breath of a sewer, you smile. She hands you a small pot of rouge, not too much. Not too much, Madame hates it when a girl looks cheap. She shows you how to apply it, her touch surprisingly gentle. The goal is to look healthy, like a country milkmaid, not a streetwalker. The irony of this is thick enough to choke on. They are trying to sell an illusion of innocence and health, a fantasy that is the polar opposite of their reality. The rules are simple, she continues, her voice slow. Madame Melody takes half of everything you earn. From the other half, you pay for your bed, your food, your clothes, and your laundry. You pay for the candles you burn and the makeup you use. You understand you will always be in debt to her. Don't ever think you can save enough to leave. That's the dream she sells you, but the math never works. This system of debt bondage was the invisible engine that powered these establishments. It was a perfectly designed trap. By controlling all the expenses and setting the prices arbitrarily high, the madam could ensure her girls never accumulated any real savings. Their earnings were an illusion, a series of figures in a ledger that Madam Melody controlled completely. Historians still debate the extent to which these women understood the financial trap they were in from the outset, or did they enter the arrangement with a sense of fatalism, understanding the system was rigged but seeing no other alternative for survival. As evening deepens, the first guests begin to arrive. They are a mix of men merchants, soldiers on leave, apprentices spending their weekly wages. They speak in low tones with Madam Melody, who greets them like an innkeeper, a shrewd businesswoman assessing her clients. She directs them to a table, pours them wine, and then, with a subtle nod, she will gesture to one of the women. You are told to simply sit on a bench near the fire, to be seen but not to engage. You are the new curiosity, and your initial value lies in your freshness, your apparent shyness. Your apparent shyness. You feel 1,000 eyes on you, your skin crawling with the weight of their appraisal. The air is thick with unspoken transactions. A man catches your eye and smiles. You force your lips into the smile Magda coached you on. It feels like a mask, brittle and paper-thin. You listen to the forced laughter of the other women, the low rumble of male voices, the clinking of glasses. This is the game, and you have just been placed on the board. The rules are not designed for you to win, they are designed only to ensure the game continues, night after night after night. It doesn't take you long to understand that this family, as Madam Melody so cynically calls it, has a structure as rigid and unforgiving as any royal court. Your position within this ecosystem is at the absolute bottom. You are the newcomer, the unknown quantity, and therefore the one with the least privilege and the most to prove. At the top of the hierarchy, of course, is Madam Melody. Her authority is absolute. She is the lawgiver, the judge, and the treasurer. Her moods dictate the atmosphere of the entire house. A rare smile from her can make a girl's day, a frown can send a ripple of anxiety through the entire dormitory. She controls everything: your work assignments, your clothing, your food, and even your time off, which you quickly learn is a privilege, not a right. Just beneath Madam Melody is her favorite. In this house, it's a woman named Isabel. Isabel is not the youngest or even the most conventionally beautiful, but she possesses a sharp wit and a keen understanding of the house's internal politics. She has been with Madam for years and has earned a position of trust. She gets the best dresses, the first pick of the more generous clients, and a small, private room of her own, a luxury so unattainable to the rest of you that it might as well be a castle. The other women watch her with a mixture of envy and fear. They resent her privileges but are careful not to cross her, because a word from Isabel in Madam S' ear can mean the difference between a relatively easy week and a very difficult one. This dynamic of the favored woman is a classic management strategy in such environments. By elevating one woman, the madam creates internal competition and discourages solidarity among the others. It ensures that any resentment is directed horizontally at each other rather than vertically at the source of their exploitation. Below Isabel are the established regulars, women like Magda who have been in the house for a year or more. They are the workhorses. They know the rhythms of the house, the preferences of the regular clients, and how to navigate Madame Melody's shifting tempers. They have a weary, cynical camaraderie. They might share a bit of gossip or a sympathetic glance, but they are also competitors. A popular new girl can mean a drop in their own earnings, so their kindness to you is always tinged with a guarded self-interest. They teach you the ropes, not out of pure altruism, but because a clueless newcomer can cause problems for everyone. If you make a mistake with a client, his anger might splash onto the whole house. Then there is you, and another girl named Sabine who arrived a few months before you. You are the new girls. You get the last pick of everything: the lumpy mattresses, the most mended dresses, the least desirable chores. You are assigned the clients. The other women don't want the ones who drink too much, the ones with rough hands and rougher manners. This is your testing ground. Your ability to endure these encounters without complaint is a measure of your utility to madamity. A strange and often overlooked aspect of this hierarchy was its connection to age and health. A woman's status was inextricably linked to her youth and perceived desirability. As she aged or showed signs of illness, her position would inevitably decline. This created a constant, gnawing anxiety about the future. The women could see their own potential fate in the older, forgotten residents who were relegated to mending and cleaning, their earning days long behind them. You learn to navigate this complex social world through observation. You learn that complaining is the quickest way to earn Madame S. wrath. You learn that befriending Isabel is strategic, but also dangerous as her favor is fickle. You learn that the small acts of kindness you share with Sabine, a shared piece of bread, a moment of quiet understanding in the crowded dormitory, are the only genuine connections you have. Historians debate whether true, lasting friendships could form in these high-pressure, competitive environments. Some accounts and court records suggest deep bonds did fall, with women supporting each other. Other sources paint a picture of a brutal, individualistic struggle for survival, where betrayal was common. The truth, as is often the case, likely lies somewhere in between. But you are also keenly aware that if a wealthy client shows interest in one of you over the other, that alliance could fray in an instant. You learn to read the subtle cues, the tightening of Magda S. jaw when a client she dislikes enters, the forced brightness in Isabella's laugh when she's charming a wealthy merchant. You become a student of survival. Finding your place in this hierarchy isn't about climbing a ladder, it's about learning how to stand on a perpetually shifting floor without falling. And every day, you feel the pressure from above and the precariances of your position below. The concept of money in this house is a strange and slippery thing. At the end of each night, you are required to hand over every single coin you've received directly to Madame Melody. She doesn't trust anyone. She takes the coins and disappears into her private office, where she keeps her master ledger, a book far more important than the one at the City Hall. Later, sometimes the next day, sometimes days later, she will call you in. Her office is the nerve center of the house. It's small and meticulously organized. A heavy wooden desk dominates the space, and on it sits the ledger bound in dark, greasy leather. This book is the source of her power. It contains the running accounts of every woman in the house. She opens it to your page, which is mostly blank for now, and begins the ritual. Last night, she says, her finger tracing a line in the book, Master Hendrik was generous. She makes a note of the amount, and the young soldier less so. She adds that figure. Then she draws a line. This is your total earnings. For a fleeting moment, you feel a spark of something, pride maybe. It's a tangible result of what you've endured, but the feeling is extinguished almost immediately. Now, she says, her tone becoming even more businesslike. From this, we deduct my half. For managing the house, for finding your clients, for my protection. She scribbles a number, cutting your earnings neatly in two. This 50% cut was a standard, and often legally sanctioned, rate in many regulated systems. It was justified as the madame's management fee. But it doesn't stop there. Then there is your board and lodging for the week. She names a price that seems impossibly high for a shared spot on a straw mattress. Another subtraction. Your meals. Another deduction. Laundry for your linens and dress. Another. The cost of the candle you used. She even deducts a tiny amount for that. It's a death by 1,000 cuts, your small pile of earnings dwindling to almost nothing before your eyes. And the dress you are wearing, she adds, tapping her quill on the page. It was Mary's, but now it is yours. It must be paid for. She subtracts a large sum, a sum you suspect is more than the dress was worth when it was new. And the registration fee I paid for you at the City Hall. A loan which you will repay. By the time she is finished, your grand total for the night, the figure that represents your actual share, is a pathetic handful of small change. Sometimes you even end the week owing her money. You have worked all week, endured countless unpleasantries, only to find yourself deeper in debt than when you started. This is the insidious genius of the system of debt bondage. It's a treadmill you can never get off of. The house sets the prices for all goods and services, and there is no one to appeal to. If Madam Melody decides a loaf of bread costs 3 times the market price, then that is what you pay. This financial control created a state of permanent dependence. One of the more bizarre and cruel aspects of this was the fine system. Madams would often invent reasons to fine the women, further chipping away at their earnings. You might be fined for being late for a meal, for having a sullen expression, for a rip in your dress, or for arguing with another woman. These rules were arbitrary and enforced at the madam's whim, making it impossible to ever get ahead. You look at the ledger, at the column of figures that represents your life. It feels like a magic trick, a sleight of hand where your labor vanishes into thin air. You want to argue, to protest that the costs are inflated, that the math is rigged. But you see the cold, final look in Madame Melody's eyes and you know it's pointless. To question the ledger is to question her authority, an act of rebellion that would bring swift and unpleasant consequences. She holds all the power, and the book is her weapon. The debate among historians about this financial exploitation is not whether it happened. It is universally acknowledged that it did, but how it was perceived by the women themselves. Did they understand the full extent of the scam, or did they, out of a lack of education or sheer desperation, accept it as the cost of doing business? Some personal testimonies that have survived from later periods suggest a full and bitter awareness. Women knew they were being cheated, but they were trapped, with no legal recourse and no other means of survival. You leave her office with your meager share of the earnings clutched in your hand. It's not enough to plan an escape. It's just enough to buy a small ribbon, or perhaps a bit of sweet jam from a street vendor, a tiny, fleeting pleasure to make the next night bearable. The debt is not just a financial burden, it's a psychological one. It's a constant, heavy weight that reminds you that you are not your own. You don't work for yourself. You work for the ledger, and the ledger belongs to Madame Melody. The chain that holds you here isn't made of iron, it's forged from ink and numbers. Once a week, usually on a Tuesday morning, a different kind of dread settles over the house. This is the day of the inspection. A carriage arrives, and out steps a man who is not a client. He is a physician, or at least he calls himself one, contracted by the city. His arrival is heralded by a grim silence from the women and a brisk, no-nonsense attitude from Madame Melody. She sees this not as an intrusion, but as a necessary part of her business, like stocking wine or mending linen. You are all herded into the main room, which has been cleared of its usual furniture. You line up, feeling less like patients and more like livestock being inspected before market. The physician is a portly man with soft, damp hands and an air of professional detachment that does little to comfort you. He sets up his small bag of tools on the table, and Madame Melody stands beside him with her ledger, ready to make note. This compulsory medical examination was a cornerstone of the Legalized system. The official justification was public health. The state, by licensing these houses, took on a responsibility to prevent the spread of venereal diseases. On the surface it sounds logical, even progressive. Proponents of the system argued that this was a key benefit, protecting not only the clients but the women themselves. However, the reality of the experience is one of profound humiliation and powerlessness. When it is your turn, you are called forward. Analyze, Madame Melody says, and you step before the doctor. He does not ask you how you are feeling. He does not look you in the eye. He performs a brief, invasive, and deeply impersonal examination. Your body is treated as an object, a potential vector of disease that must be checked and certified. This is a state-mandated procedure, and you have no right to refuse. The historical debate around these inspections is fierce. Was this a genuine, if crude, public health measure, or was it primarily another tool of control, a way to monitor and discipline the women's bodies? Many historians argue for the latter. They point out that the focus was almost exclusively on the women. The male clients, who were equally responsible for the transmission of disease, were rarely, if ever, subjected to similar mandatory checks. The entire burden of cleanliness and safety was placed squarely on the shoulders of the women. The system wasn't designed to eradicate disease, but to create the illusion of a safe product for the male consumer. If the physician finds any sign of illness, real or imagined, his verdict is swift. He says a quiet word to Madame Melody, who makes a mark next to the woman's name in the ledger. The consequences are immediate and devastating. The afflicted woman is declared unfit for work. She is confined to the dormitory or a small, isolated room, ostracized from the others. She is no longer an earner, she is merely a drain on the house's resources. Her debt continues to accumulate as she is charged for her bed and meager food, but she has no way to earn. Her illness becomes a financial catastrophe as well as a physical one. A particularly cruel and lesser-known aspect of this system was the hospital lock-in. In some cities, women diagnosed with a venereal disease were forcibly confined to special hospitals or isolation wards. These were often grim, prison-like institutions. A woman could be locked away for weeks or months, subjected to painful and often ineffective treatments, mercury rubs being the notoriously popular and toxic one. She had no say in her treatment and could not leave until a state-sanctioned doctor declared her cured. For many, it was a death sentence, not from the disease itself, but from the toxic cures or the despair of confinement. You watch as one of the other women, a quiet girl named Lena, is given the dreaded nod by the doctor. You see the color drain from her face. You see the other women instinctively take a small step away from her. In that moment, she becomes an outcast. Madame Melody's face is a mask of cold disappointment, not for Lena's health, but for the loss of income she represents. You pass your own inspection, the doctor giving a curt nod of approval. You feel a wave of relief, but it's immediately followed by a profound sense of shame and a chilling fear. Your health, your very physical integrity is not your own. It is a commodity, a prerequisite for your job. And you know that it is fragile. Any day, it could be your turn to receive the quiet word, the mark in the ledger to be deemed a faulty product, and to be cast aside. The weekly inspection is a stark reminder that under this system of protection, your body is not a vessel for your own life, but a piece of property whose value is constantly being assessed. Your world has shrunk. It has defined edges, both visible and invisible. The most tangible boundary is the street the house is on, and the 2 or 3 adjacent alleys that make up the city's official entertainment district. This is your entire universe. You are, by law and by Madame Melody's decree, forbidden to venture beyond it without specific permission and a chaperone, usually one of the older, trusted women who acts as a guard. This practice of containment or zoning was a key feature of regulated prostitution in many historical cities. The authorities wanted to keep the trade, and the women involved in it, confined to a specific, easily monitored area. This was often called the red light district, though the name itself is a later invention. These districts were designed to be porous for clients, but impermeable for the women who lived and worked there. It was a cage with a one-way door. On the rare occasions you are allowed out, perhaps to buy ribbons or run an errand for madam, you must wear your yellow shawl. As you step off your street and into the main thoroughfare, you feel the immediate change. People's gazes slide over you, then quickly away. Mothers pull their children a little closer. A group of apprentices on a corner might call out a crude remark. The shawl does its job, it marks you, isolates you. You walk through the city, but you are not a part of it. You are an alien moving through a foreign landscape. The street you live on is a world unto itself. It is a microcosm of the city, but with all the colors turned up and the shadows deepened. During the day, it's deceptively quiet. Delivery carts rattle over the cobblestones, bringing barrels of wine and sacks of flour. You might see other women from other houses, also wearing their identifying garments. Scurrying on errands, you exchange brief, knowing glances, a silent acknowledgement of your shared confinement. There is a silent community of the marked, a fellowship of the yellow shawl. As dusk falls, the street comes alive. Lanterns are lit. Music begins to drift from the open doorways of the various houses and taverns. Men, alone or in small groups, begin to drift into the area. Their demeanor changes as they cross the invisible line into your district. They become louder, their laughter more boisterous. They are entering a space where the normal rules of social conduct are relaxed. The architecture of the street itself contributes to the feeling of confinement. The buildings are tall and close together, leaning over the narrow lane and blocking out much of the sky. It feels like a canyon. You can't see the horizon. You can't see anything beyond the next corner. Your entire field of vision is limited to this small, prescribed space. It's a brilliant and cruel piece of urban design, whether intentional or not. A strange and little-known fact about these designated streets is that they sometimes develop their own unique microeconomies. You'd find vendors selling things specifically to the residents and their clientele: cheap jewelry, single-dose perfumes, fortifying alcoholic drinks, and so-called love potions. A whole support industry existed in the shadow of the main trade, all packed into a few square blocks. Historians still debate the true purpose of this zoning. Was it primarily for the moral hygiene of the city, to keep the vice from spilling over into respectable neighborhoods, or was it a more pragmatic tool for policing and taxation by concentrating the trade in one area? The city guard could more easily keep an eye on things, quell brawls, and ensure the madams were paying their taxes. It turned a sprawling social issue into a geographically manageable problem. The city created a ghetto, not based on race or religion, but on profession. One afternoon you were standing in the doorway of the house, watching the world go by. You see a family, a mother, a father, and a small child hurrying through your street. They are clearly lost, their faces tight with anxiety. They are holding a map and looking around, desperate to find their way back to the normal part of the city. They avoid looking at you, at the house, at the red lantern. To them, this street is a dangerous foreign territory they have stumbled into by mistake. You watch them go, and a profound sense of isolation washes over you. They can leave. They can consult their map and, in 5 minutes, be back in their own world. You cannot. This street, this canyon of brick and timber, is your world. The map of your life has been redrawn, its borders set by law and enforced by shame. You are not just in a house, you are in a district, a designated zone that separates you from the rest of humanity as surely as a castle wall. The nights bleed into one another, a parade of faces that you begin to categorize in your mind as a means of survival. Each man who walks through the door is a new story, a new challenge, a new performance. You become an unwilling expert in the study of men, seeing a side of them that their wives, their mothers, and their employers will never witness. There are the young apprentices, barely more than boys, flush with their first taste of wages and freedom. They often travel in packs, their bravado a thin mask for their nervousness. They are loud and clumsy, trying to act more worldly than they are. With them, the performance is one of patience, of gently guiding them through a transaction they are both excited and terrified by. You have to be part sister, part teacher, all while maintaining the illusion of desirability. Then, there are the merchants. They're older, often married, their clothes of a finer cut, their purses heavier. They are not looking for fumbling first experiences, they are looking for an escape. They talk. Oh, how they talk. They complain about their wives, their business rivals, the price of wool, the city council's latest tax. With them, you must be a confidant, a sympathetic ear. You learn to nod and murmur in all the right places, feigning interest in subjects you care nothing about. They are not paying for your body so much as for a space where they can be the most important person in the room, where their words are listened to without judgment or consequence. They are buying an hour of uncomplicated ego stroking. The most difficult are the soldiers. They come and go with the tides of war and deployment. They carry the smell of the barracks and the road with them. They are men who live with violence and death, and they bring that coiled tension into the house with them. Their laughter is a little too wild, their grip a little too tight. There is a desperation in their eyes that you learn to recognize and fear. Madame Melody often gives these clients to the newer girls, you and Sabine, because the more experienced women know how to refuse. With them, a job is not about performance, but about endurance. This constant exposure to the hidden lives of men is a strange and corrupting education. You see the pillars of the community, the men who walk through the city in the daytime with their heads held high, behave in ways that betray their public personas. You see hypocrisy in its purest form. The same man who might sit on a council that drafts laws to control you will come to you at night to break the very moral codes he publicly espouses. A curious and rarely discussed aspect of this life was the role of the prostitute as a sort of unofficial secret keeper. In a world without therapists, a woman in a brothel often heard things: business deals, political gossip, personal confessions. This knowledge was a dangerous and useless currency. To repeat what you heard would be professional suicide, but the weight of all those secrets, all those glimpses into the dark corners of powerful men's lives, is a heavy burden to carry. Historians have long debated how to interpret the clientele of these establishments. Were these men simply products of a society with a rigid sexual double standard, where nice women were not supposed to be sexual, or were they acting out of a darker desire for power and control over women in a transcational setting? The answer is likely both. The system catered to a wide range of male desires, from simple physical release to more complex psychological needs for dominance and escape. Sometimes a face will stand out from the blur. There is a quiet, elderly watchmaker who comes in once a month. He never requests a specific woman. He sits at a table, drinks 1 cup of mulled wine, and pays to have one of the women simply sit and play a game of checkers with him. He barely speaks. He just seems to crave a moment of quiet, uncomplicated human company. The other women find him strange, but you find his visits a small, welcome island of calm in a sea of demand. Then there's the man with the scarred hands, a stonemason by the look of them, who gets drunk and weeps for a lost love. You have to be a vessel for his grief, a stand-in for a woman you will never know. You learn to compartmentalize, to build a wall between the woman they are interacting with, the smiling, compliant analyzing the person you're inside. That inner self, you learn to protect fiercely. It's the only part of you that isn't for sale. Every night, you add new faces to your mental catalog, each one chipping away a tiny piece of your faith in the world, but also sharpening your instincts for survival. Once every 2 weeks, if business has been good and her mood is generous, Madame Melody will grant you a rest day. The phrase itself is a cruel joke, a masterclass in deceptive language. It is not a day of freedom. It is simply a day when you are not expected to work with clients. The invisible walls of the house and the district remain as solid as ever. On these days, you are woken at the same early hour for chores. The floors must still be scrubbed, the linens washed, the mending done. The work of the house is ceaseless, but after the morning's labor, you are allotted a few hours of what Madame calls personal time. This is the illusion of a day off. You are allowed to remain in the dormitory, to read if you have a book, or to simply sleep. Most of the women use this time to catch up on the profound, bone-deep exhaustion that is their constant companion. The dormitory on a rest day afternoon is a landscape of sleeping forms, the air thick with the sound of deep, heavy breathing. It is a fragile piece, easily shattered. You, however, crave a sliver of the outside world. You might be given permission to go to the market, always accompanied by Magda or another senior woman. This is not a leisurely shopping trip. You are given a specific list and a small amount of money. You are to go directly to the market, make your purchases and return. There is no lingering, no browsing, no idle chatter with vendors. Your chaperone watches you like a hawk. Her job is to ensure you don't speak to anyone you shouldn't, and most importantly, that you don't get any ideas about running away. The yellow shawl you are forced to wear feels heavier on these trips, a constant reminder of your status even as you try to pretend for a moment that you are just a normal woman doing her shopping. The market is a sensory overload. The colors, the smells, it's a stark contrast to the dim, perfumed twilight of the house. You see families, children, women your own age laughing with their friends. Each glimpse of normal life is a small, sharp stab of pain. It's a world you can see and walk through, but one you can no longer touch or belong to. This constant surveillance was a key part of the system. A woman was never truly free, even on her supposed day off. This prevented the formation of outside relationships and cut her off from any potential support network. Her isolation was a crucial element of her captivity. One particularly bizarre and little-known aspect of these rest days in some cities was the mandatory church attendance. On certain holidays or Sundays, the women of the regulated houses would be marched to a specific church for a special service. They would be seated in a designated section, often at the back or in a screened-off gallery, to pray for their souls. It was a public performance of piety, designed to appease the moral sensibilities of the wider community. The hypocrisy is staggering. The same city that licensed and taxed their trade would then force them to atone for it. Historians debate the purpose of this forced piety. Was it a genuine, if misguided, attempt at moral reform, or was it a cynical act of social theatre, a way for the city to have its cake and eat it, to profiting from vice while publicly condemning it? The evidence overwhelmingly points to the latter. It was another form of control. Another form of control, another public ritual that reinforced the women's status as sinners in need of redemption. You have not yet been forced to attend one of these services, but Magda has told you about them with a deep, weary cynicism. They make you kneel and pray for forgiveness, she had said, mending a tear in a dress. Forgiveness for what? For trying to survive in the world they built. So, on your precious rest day, you choose the lesser of the evils. You stay within the confines of the house. You find a quiet corner of the dormitory and darn socks, your fingers moving mechanically. You listen to the city outside, the distant shouts of children playing, the peal of a church bell. These are the sounds of a life that is no longer yours. The rest you are given is not a restorative peace. It is a hollow, empty time that only serves to highlight the fullness of the life you have lost. It is the quiet at the center of the cage where the silence is more deafening than the noise. The distant church bell that usually marks the passing of a world you don't belong to sounds different today. Its close are more insistent. The reason becomes clear when Madame Melody enters the dormitory, not with her usual summons for chores, but with an announcement. Today is a special saint's day, and as a demonstration of the house's moral standing, you will all be attending morning service. A collective groan, quiet but palpable, ripples through the room. Magda catches your confused look and gives you a weary, knowing eye roll. "Oh, yes," she whispers sarcastically, our biannual soul scrubbing. Preparation for church is another strange performance. You are instructed to wear your most modest dress, to cover your hair neatly. But then, as the final touch, you must all don your yellow shawls. The contradiction is jarring. You are meant to look like penitent sinners, yet you are still required to wear the very badge of the sin for which you are supposed to be penitent. It makes no sense, until you realize the day is not about genuine repentance. It's about public display. You are marched through the streets in a silent, orderly procession, with one of Madame's older, stern-faced servants leading the way. You are a spectacle. The usual street noise seems to hush as you pass. People stop and stare. You are a parade of shame, a living sermon on vice, presented for the edification of the good citizens of the city. They look at you not with pity, but with a kind of smug righteousness. They are the clean, and you are the stain. The church itself is breathtaking. You step inside, and the soaring stone arches, the kaleidoscope of colors from the stained glass windows, and the faint, hoary scent of old incense and beeswax are designed to make you feel small, to inspire awe. But you are not led to the main pews where the city's respectable families are settling in, their fine clothes rustling. Instead, you are directed up a narrow stone staircase at the back to a high, screened-off gallery. The leper's gallery, Magda mutters under her breath. From here, you can look down upon the congregation, but they can only see you as shadowy figures behind a wooden screen. You are present, but separate. Seen but not seen. The priest's voice booms through the sanctuary. He is a fiery orator, and his sermon today is on the evils of temptation and the weakness of the flesh. He speaks of the fallen woman as a vessel of sin, a snare for the souls of men. He paints vivid pictures of damnation. And as he speaks, you look down from your shadowy perch and you see the faces of the men in the pews below. You recognize some of them. There is the portly merchant who complains about his wife. There is the city councilman who sponsored the very law that forces you to wear your shawl. They sit there with their families, their faces masks of pious contemplation, listening to a condemnation of the very services they themselves purchase. The hypocrisy is so thick, so audacious. It's almost dizzying. It is here that the relationship between the regulated brothel system and the church becomes truly complex. While publicly condemning the trade, religious institutions were often pragmatically entangled with it. A truly strange and cynical aspect of this in some locales was the atonement tithe or syntax paid not to the state, but directly to the church. Brothel keepers would be required to make a donation for the spiritual welfare of the women under their charge. This money, born of the very trade being condemned from the pulpit, would then be used to fund the church's charities or line its coffers. Historians are still debating the mentality behind this. Did the clergy genuinely believe they were salvaging souls by taking this tainted money and putting it to good use? Or was it a form of religious racketeering, a sanctimonious shakedown where the church profited from the sin? It so loudly decried it's a question that cuts to the heart of the error's moral contradiction. As the collection plate is paused below, you imagine a portion of those coins eventually making their way from Madame Melody's ledger into the church's accounts. You are not just a sinner to be prayed for, you are a line item in a spiritual budget. The service ends. You are herded back down the stairs and out into the daylight, which feels harsh and accusing after the dim sanctity of the church. The experience leaves you feeling hollowed out. It was a moment of spiritual reflection. It was a political act. It was the city and the church demonstrating their power over you, reinforcing your place at the very bottom of the social and moral ladder. As you walk back to the house, the scratchy wool of the yellow shawl against your neck has never felt more like a yoke. You have been to God's house, but you have found no sanctuary there, only a more ornate version of the same cage. In a world where every minute of your day is controlled, where your body is policed and your earnings confiscated, rebellion cannot be a grand gesture. You cannot storm out. You cannot stage a protest. To do so would be to invite punishment so swift and severe that the thought alone is terrifying. So resistance becomes a thing of tiny, secret victories. It happens in the cracks of the system, in moments so small they are almost invisible. You learn to steal back time. When you are sent to the market, you learn the art of the long route. You take a back alley that adds 3 precious minutes to your journey, 3 minutes where you are out of sight of your chaperone, where you can breathe air that doesn't belong to Madame Melody. You might pause and watch a blacksmith at his forge, the rhythmic clang of his hammer a sound of honest, straightforward labor that feels like a message from another universe. This act of time theft is your first taste of defiance. You learn to create a private, internal world. When you are with a client, listening to his endless complaints or enduring his clumsy advances, you retreat into your own mind. You perfect the art of the vacant smile, the automatic nod. While Annalise is performing her role, you are miles away. You are mentally rebuilding your childhood home, walking through the fields, reciting the names of the wildflowers that grew by the stream. This mental escape is a crucial survival mechanism. They can own your body, but they cannot own your thoughts, not unless you let them. Small acts of sabotage become a source of grim satisfaction. When mending a client's favorite shirt, which he paid extra to have laundered at the house, perhaps you use a thread that is just a little bit weaker than it should be. It will hold for now, but it will break sooner than it ought to. When a particularly odious man demands a cup of wine, perhaps you choose the cup with the tiny, almost unopenable chip on the rim. These are petty, pathetic acts, but they are yours. Of saying, I am here, and I can still affect this world, even in this tiny, insignificant way. One of the most common and powerful forms of this hidden resistance was the sharing of information. In the dormitory, late at night, in hushed whispers, you and the other women exchange intelligence. Master Albrecht is in a foul mood tonight. His ship was delayed. Avoid him if you can. The new magistrate has a taste for reed heads. Isabel, be ready. Don't let the weaver from the north pay you in script. HES leaving town tomorrow and it won't be honored. This network of shared knowledge is a lifeline. It helps you navigate the treacherous waters of the nightly work, protecting each other in small but meaningful ways from financial loss or physical harm. A fascinating and rarely documented form of resistance was the use of folk magic and superstition. A woman might hide a certain type of herb under her mattress for protection, or secretly trace a symbol on a doorway to ward off a cruel client. One bizarre but historically noted practice was the spitting curse, where a woman might subtly spit on the ground behind a man who had mistreated her, a silent, symbolic act of contempt and revenge. Whether these acts were born of genuine belief or were simply psychological coping mechanisms is something historians debate. But for the women, they were a way to reclaim a sliver of agency, to feel as if they had some power, however mystical, in a world where they were otherwise powerless. You develop your own small rituals. You have managed to acquire a tiny, stubby pencil and a few scraps of paper, bartered from a kitchen boy in exchange for a piece of your bread. Late at night, when the others are asleep, you practice writing your real name. Not analyze. Your name, you write it over and over and over until the shapes of the letters feel like a prayer. It is an act of profound importance. It is a declaration that the person in the city ledger is a fiction, and that you, the real you, still exist. You keep these scraps of paper hidden in a loose floorboard beneath your bed. They are your most treasured possession. These moments of defiance are like tiny air bubbles rising from the deep. They are not enough to lift you to the surface, not enough to break you free. But they are enough to remind you that you are still breathing. They are the proof that even in the most oppressive system, the human spirit's desire for autonomy can never be entirely extinguished. It simply goes underground, into the shadows, and learns to fight with whispers instead of shouts. Just as blacksmiths have their own terms for their tools and sailors have their own names for the winds, the women in the house have a language of their own. It's a secret lexicon, a tapestry of slang and coded phrases that you begin to pick up, first through confusion, and then through practice. This jargon is more than just colorful language, it's a vital tool for communication and survival in a world where open speech is dangerous. You first encounter it when Magda, seeing a particularly wealthy merchant enter the house, whispers to Isabel, "The fat goose has arrived. Time to pluck the feathers." A fat goose is not just any rich client, it's a specific type, one who is known to be ostentatious with his money, easy to flatter, and likely to spend lavishly if handled correctly. The phrase conveys a whole strategy in a few words. A man who is rough or unpleasant isn't just called cruel, a cobblestone, hard and damaging to walk on. A young, nervous first-timer is a fledgling. The city guard who patrols the street isn't called the guard, the iron rooster, because he crows about the law but is made of cold, unfeeling metal. The weekly medical inspection becomes the purity pageant. Each term is imbued with a dark, cynical humor that acts as a shield against the grim reality of the situation. This creation of an internal slang, or argot, is a common feature in many marginalized and criminal subcultures throughout history. It serves several purposes. Firstly, it creates a strong sense of group identity. To know the slang is to be an outsider. It bonds you to the other women, creating a secret world that Madame Melody and the clients cannot fully penetrate. You can have entire conversations in plain sight that are utterly opaque to the uninitiated. Secondly, it's a language of defense. You might hear Sabine murmur, "Careful, analyze. This one's a mirror gazer," which is code for a man who is dangerously vain and prone to anger, if he feels his ego has been slighted. This quick, coded warning can arm you with the information you need to handle a difficult encounter without tipping off the client himself. A particularly interesting and somewhat debated category of this slang revolves around money. Different types of coins might have different names, and different levels of payment were described with phrases that had nothing to do with currency. A disappointing payment might be called ditch water, while an unexpectedly large one could be summer rain. This linguistic trick might have been a way to mentally distance themselves from the rot-rancational nature of their work, turning the stark reality of being paid for their bodies into a more abstract coded exchange. One historical tidbit that scholars of linguistics find fascinating is trying to trace the origins of these slang terms. Some terms were hyperlocal, unique to a single house or a single city block, and died out when that community dispersed. Others were surprisingly widespread, suggesting a network of communication between women in different houses, or even different houses, or even different houses, or even different cities. How these terms traveled is a mystery, perhaps through women moving between establishments, or through gossip shared in the marketplace. You start to use the language yourself. At first, it feels clumsy on your tongue, like wearing someone else's shoes. But soon it becomes second nature. When you see Lena, the girl who was declared sick, finally emerge from her confinement looking pale and thin, you whisper to Sabine, "The ghost is walking again." It's a cruel term, but it's the house's term. To use it is to show you understand the rules, that you belong. The slang is also a way to talk about the unspeakable. The future, the fear of aging and losing your place in the house, is never discussed directly. Instead, a woman might say she worries about the grey season arriving too soon. The prospect of dying in the house is referred to as paying the final rent. These euphemisms allow for the expression of deep-seated fears without having to voice the terrifying reality in stark, plain terms. This secret language is the sound of your survival. It's the verbal equivalent of the hidden passages in a castle. It allows you and the other women to navigate your prison, to warn each other of dangers, and to maintain a small pocket of shared identity that is yours and yours alone. It's a language forged in the dark, spoken in whispers, and it is as essential to your life here as the bread you eat and the air you breathe. The fear is a low, constant hum beneath the surface of your daily life, but some days it becomes a roar. It's the fear of the future, a future that is tied directly and brutally to your own body. In this house, your body is your only asset, your only tool, and you are acutely aware that tools can break. You see it happen to others. You see Magda, usually so resilient, laid low for 3 days with a fever. You watch Madame Melody's face tighten with irritation, not concern. For every day Magda is unable to work. You see the cost of her illness tallied in the ledger, her debt growing while she lies shivering in the dormitory. Her physical suffering is compounded by financial punishment. You start to notice the small betrayals of your own body. A knee that aches after a long night on your feet. A cough that lingers a little too long. A new bruise that appears on your skin from a client's rough grip. Each small ailment is not just a discomfort, it's a terrifying premonition. It's a crack in the foundation of your livelihood. You find yourself lying awake at night, cataloging your own physical sensations, hyper-aware of any sign that your body might be starting to disobey, to fail you. The ultimate fear, the one that is rarely spoken of but always present, is the fear of a pregnancy. In the world of the regulated brothel, a pregnancy is an absolute catastrophe. It is the one condition that cannot be hidden, the one that will inevitably render you unable to work for a prolonged period. Madame Melody would see it as the ultimate act of carelessness, a fatal flaw in her merchandise. What happened to women in this situation varied grimly from place to place and house to house. Some would be unceremoniously thrown out onto the street, left to fend for themselves at their most vulnerable. Others might be passed on to a back alley midwife who specialized in dangerous, often deadly, procedures to fix the problem. In the cold calculus of the house's economy, a baby was a liability with no potential for profit. A bizarre and tragic side note to this is the existence of so-called lying-in houses, which were sometimes attached to convents or charitable institutions. A woman might be sent there to give birth in secret, only to have the child immediately taken from her and placed in an orphanage. The founding homes of this era had notoriously high mortality rates. This solution was not an act of mercy, it was a way to dispose of the problem and, in theory, return the woman to work as quickly as possible, her connection to her child severed completely. The psychological toll of this constant anxiety is immense. You begin to see your own body, not as a part of you, but as a separate, unreliable entity that you must constantly manage and monitor. It's an instrument that you have to keep in tune, knowing that one broken string could end the performance forever. This fear colors everything. When you eat the nightly stew, you are not just sating your hunger, you are consciously trying to keep your strength up. When you are granted a rest day, you don't see it as a luxury, but as a necessary period of maintenance, a chance for your body to repair its minor damages before the next onslaught. Historians often debate the average career length of a woman in this profession. It's a difficult figure to calculate as records are spotty. But the consensus is that it was brutally short. A few years of intense work could leave a woman physically and emotionally exhausted, her health broken. The system was designed for a high turnover rate. There was always a new girl, fresh from the countryside, waiting to take the place of one who was used up. One evening you are helping Sabine bind a cut on her hand, a silly accident involving a broken wine glass. As you wrap the clean linen around her fingers, you are both struck by the same thought. A small injury like this can be managed. But what if it were worse? What if it were a broken bone? a lingering sickness, something that wouldn't heal in a few days. You look at each other, and in that shared glance is the entire unspoken terror of your existence. You are living on a knife's edge. Your youth and your health are the only things keeping you from falling. And you know with a certainty that settles deep in your bones that you cannot stay balanced on that edge for a long time. Time is not your friend. It is an enemy, slowly, patiently grinding you down. The question that haunts your every waking moment is not if your body will fail, but when Madame Melody's control over you is not just a matter of rocks, ledges, and moors. Her most effective tools are invisible. She is a master of psychological manipulation, an expert at weaving a web of hope and fear that keeps you tethered to the house more effectively than any physical chain. She wields your own emotions as weapons against you. Her primary method is the strategic doling out of small kindness. After a particularly difficult week, just when you feel you are at your breaking point, she might single you out for a rare compliment. "You handled Master Guillaume well last night, Annalise," she might say in front of the other women. He was pleased. This small crumb of praise, in the starvation diet of your emotional life, feels like a feast. It makes you feel seen. It makes you feel seen. Or perhaps she will give you a small, unexpected gift: a slightly better dress, a new ribbon for your hair, an extra helping of stew. They are calculated investments. They are designed to create a sense of obligation, a feeling of gratitude that confuses your resentment and makes it harder to hate her completely. This creates a toxic, codependent relationship, what some modern psychologists might call trauma bonding. You begin to associate your survival with the very person who is the architect of your misery. She is also an expert at fostering jealousy and competition among the women. She will praise Isabel for her earnings in front of Magda, knowing it will stoke Magda's resentment. She will give Sabine a desirable client that you had hoped for, just to remind you that you are replaceable. She ensures you are also busy competing with each other for her favor that you never think to unite against her. It's a classic divide and conquer strategy, and it works perfectly. One of the most insidious and lesser-known tactics used by madams was the manipulation of hope, specifically the hope of marriage or rescue. Every so often, a story would circulate, perhaps started by Madame Melody herself, of a girl from a house. Just story usually goes that he fell in love with her, paid off her debts, and married her, lifting her into a life of respectable luxury. This is the ultimate fantasy, the Cinderella story of the brothel. Whether these stories were ever true is a matter of intense historical debate. While it was not completely unheard of for a wealthy man to take a prostitute as a long-term mistress, the idea of him marrying her was, in most societies of the time, a social impossibility. It would have meant scandal and ruin for him. But the truth of the story doesn't matter. What matters is the power of the story. It's a lottery ticket that Madame Melody dangles in front of you. It keeps you compliant. It makes you put up with the worst clients, thinking that any one of them could be the one. It encourages you to be more charming, more alluring, not just for the money, but for the chance at this mythical escape. She also uses fear, but not just the fear of physical punishment. She uses the fear of the unknown. She constantly reminds you of the dangers of the world outside her walls. Out there, shall say, gesturing vaguely towards the street, there is starvation. There are men who will hurt you for nothing, with no one to stop them. In this house you are safe, you are fed. 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 You have a bed. She paints the world outside as a terrifying, chaotic wilderness, and her house is the only bastion of safety. After a while, you start to believe her. The cage starts to feel like a sanctuary. This is the final turn of the psychological screw, making the prisoner fear freedom. You feel these invisible strings every day. You feel yourself craving her approval even as you resent her control. You feel a flash of jealousy when another girl gets a compliment. You find yourself looking at each new client, wondering, is this the one, even though you know, deep down, that it's a fool's hope. The most masterful part of her manipulation is that it makes you complicit in your own captivity. You start to police your own thoughts, your own behaviors, to align with her expectations. You start to see the other women as rivals. You start to believe that the grim security of the house is better than the terrifying uncertainty of freedom. The bars of your cage are no longer just made of wood and iron, they are forged inside your own mind. And those, you are beginning to realize, are the hardest ones to break. Most days are monotonous grey, a cycle of weary nights and weary days indistinguishable from one another. But every once in a while, something happens that breaks the pattern. A tiny, unexpected crack appears in the wall of your world, letting in a sliver of light. These moments are dangerous because they give you a taste of something you are not supposed to have hoped. It might be a client, not the usual sort, not the merchants with their rough hands. This one is different. He is a student, perhaps, or a traveling scribe. He is young, and his eyes do not hold the usual predatory appraisal. He seems almost as uncomfortable as you are. He asks for your name, and when you say analyze, he asks if it's your real name. The question is so unexpected, so direct. You shake your head, and he nods, as if he understands. He doesn't want the usual services. Instead, he asks if you can read. When you admit you can, just a little, his face lights up. He pulls a small, well-worn book of poetry from his coat. For the next hour, in the dim, flickering candlelight of the small room, he asks you to read to him. Your voice is hesitant, at first stumbling over the words, but he is patient. You read about love and loss, and the beauty of a world far from this house. For that 1 hour, you are not analyzed, the prostitute. You are a young woman sharing a moment of quiet beauty with another person. When the hour is up, he pays you, pressing the coins into your hand with a gentle squeeze. Thank you, he says, and there is a genuine warmth in his voice. You have a beautiful reading voice. He leaves and you never see him again. The encounter leaves you shaken. It was a moment of simple, human connection, devoid of the usual transactional coldness. It is a reminder that the world contains people like him, that kindness and gentleness still exist. This memory becomes a secret treasure. You hoard it, replay it in your mind in the darkest hours. It's a double-edged sword. It soothes you, but it also makes the return to your normal reality that much harsher. The contrast between that 1 hour and all the others is a painful testament to what you are missing. Another time, the glimmer of light comes not from a person, but from an object. While cleaning out a room after a client has left, you find something he has forgotten, a small, intricately carved wooden bird, no bigger than your thumb. It's a beautiful, delicate thing. You know you should turn it into melody. Any object of value found in the house belongs to her. But you don't. You quickly hide it in your pocket. Later, in the privacy of the dormitory, you examine it. It's a swallow, its wings outstretched, as if in mid-flight. It represents everything you don't have: freedom, the ability to soar away from this place. This tiny bird becomes your secret talisman. It's a physical manifestation of your desire to escape. You hide it with your precious scraps of paper under the loose floorboard. It's a foolish, dangerous thing to keep. If found, it would be considered theft. These small glimmers of light are historically documented, though rare. Personal accounts from women in later, better documented periods sometimes speak of a kind or a secret gift that was kept as a reminder of a world outside. However, historians are often rightly cynical about these stories. It's a field where the golden-hearted client narrative is a pervasive and often dangerous myth that can romanticize and soften the harsh realities of exploitation. The debate continues: were these moments genuine instances of human connection, or just more complex forms of client gratification, where the man was buying a more nuanced innocence and redemption fantasy? For you, the debate is irrelevant. The young man's kindness felt real. The little wooden bird feels real. But these moments are fleeting. The student does not return. The next client is a gruff wool trader who smells of lemon and cheap gin, and the brief magic of the poetry reading shatters into a million pieces. The wooden bird in its hiding place feels less like a promise and more like a taunt. Hope, you learn, is a dangerous and powerful drug. A small dose can make the unbearable bearable. But it also creates a longing, a deep and painful ache for more. It's a flickering candle in a vast darkness, and you are terrified that one day, the wind will shift and it will be extinguished for good. For now you huddle close to its tiny flame, trying to keep it alive. The city guard. You see them every day, their presence a constant feature of your restricted world. They patrol your street in pairs, their footsteps heavy and measured on the cobblestones. They carry stout wooden batons, and sometimes a sword hangs at their hip, a symbol of the city's authority. Their official purpose, as stated in the city ordinances, is to keep the peace and ensure the orderly conduct of the district. But what that means in practice is far more ambiguous. Are they here to protect you? That is the official line. They are here to prevent brawls from spilling out into the street, to deter robbers, and to intervene if a client becomes violent. And on rare occasions, you have seen them haul away a drunken soldier who refused to pay, his protest silenced by the threat of the baton. In those moments, the guards feel like a shield, a thin line between the fragile order of the house and utter chaos. But most of the time, they don't feel like protectors. They feel like wardens. Their gaze is not reassuring, it is watchful, suspicious. They are not looking out for your welfare, they are looking out for infractions. They are watching to make sure you are wearing your yellow shawl when you step outside. They are watching to make sure you don't stray beyond the boundaries of the district. They are listening for the sounds of a fight, not to save the victim, but to make sure the disturbance doesn't disrupt the tax-paying businesses of the neighborhood. Their duty is to the city's order, and you are simply a component of that order that needs to be managed. There is a strange, almost symbiotic relationship between the guards and Madame Melody. They are two arms of the same system. The guards patrol the outside of the cage, and she patrols the inside. They acknowledge each other with a curt nod as they pass. You know that Madame pays a little something to the patrol sergeant. A few coins slip to him each week to ensure his men are prompt when called, and perhaps to ensure they look the other way at minor infractions within the house. It's a quiet, corrupt, and perfectly functional arrangement. This dual role of the police in regulated districts is a subject of much historical discussion. Were they law enforcement or were they essentially state-sanctioned bouncers for the vice industry? The evidence suggests they were both. The legality of the brothels put the guards in a complicated position. They were enforcing the law, but the law itself was built on a foundation of moral contradiction. Their job was to stop the trade, but to make sure it ran smoothly and didn't bother the respectable citizens. A lesser-known aspect of their role was intelligence gathering. The guards were the eyes and ears of the city magistrate. They would report back on which houses were busiest, on the comings and goings of known criminals who might frequent the district, and on any rumors of unrest. The women in the houses were often seen as a source of information, and the guard might try to coax a bit of gossip out of a girl in exchange for a small favor. This turned the women into unwilling, and often unknowing, informants in a system that offered them no real protection. You learn to read the guards as you learn to read your clients. There is the older, fat sergeant who is lazy and easily bribed with a cup of wine. There is the young, zealous recruit who seems to enjoy the power his uniform gives him a little too much. His eyes linger on the women with a mixture of contempt and desire that makes your skin crawl. He is the most dangerous kind, the one who believes he is on a moral crusade, even as he polices a district built on what his own church calls sin. One evening, a fight breaks out in the house. A client, a burly carter, accuses one of the girls of stealing his purse. It's a common, and usually false, accusation. He is drunk and enraged. He overturns a table, and his shouts echo through the house. Madame Melody's usual stern authority has no effect on him. She sends the kitchen boy to fetch the guard. 2 guards arrive, batons in hand. They don't investigate. They don't ask questions. They simply grab the carter, who is much bigger than them but cowed by their uniforms, and drag him out into the street. They are not dispensing justice, they are removing a problem. The girl who was accused is left weeping and terrified. The guards don't speak a word to her. Their job is done. The disturbance has been quelled. You watch them disappear down the street, their lanterns swinging in the dark. In that moment, the illusion that they are here for your protection shatters completely. They are not your allies. They are the maintenance crew for the machine that grinds you down. They are here to protect the system, to protect the house's ability to generate revenue for the city and for Madame Melody. You are not a citizen they are sworn to protect. You are just part of the inventory. The city erupts. It's the annual Midsummer Carnival, a week-long festival of sanctioned chaos that turns the entire social order upside down. For the respectable citizens, it's a time of feasting, parades, and masked balls. It's a brief, joyous escape from the drudgery of daily life. For you, it is the busiest and most grueling week of the year. The carnival doesn't stop at the border of your district, it floods it. The streets, already narrow, are now choked with people. There are street performers, musicians, food vendors, and everywhere masks. The mask is the key to the carnival. A man in a mask is anonymous, free from the usual constraints of his reputation and social standing. And many of these masked men find their way to your door. The house, which usually operates on a predictable rhythm, is thrown into a state of high-pressure frenzy. The doors are opened from midday until dawn. The trickle of clients becomes a constant, demanding flood. The air grows thick and hot, heavy with the smell of sweat, wine, and the sweet, cloying scent of the sugared carnival cakes that everyone seems to be eating. Madame Melody is in her element. She moves through the chaos with a grim, focused energy, her eyes constantly scanning the room, directing traffic, making lightning-fast calculations of profit. Her ledger for this week will be filled with ink. For her, the carnival is a harvest. For you and the other women, it's an endurance test. There are no breaks, no quiet moments. You are run ragged, moving from one client to the next with barely a moment to catch your breath. The sheer number of men, their faces hidden behind the grotesque or comical masks of the festival, is disorienting. They are not individuals, they are a faceless, demanding mob. Their carnival-fueled inhibitions are gone, and their requests are often bolder, their behavior more unpredictable. The sound of the celebration outside, the laughter, the music, the fireworks that burst in the night sky is a constant, mocking soundtrack to your labor. The city is celebrating its freedom, while you are trapped in the engine room of that celebration, fueling it with your exhaustion. The joyous noise from the streets only serves to amplify the silence and despair inside you. This phenomenon, the intensification of work in brothels during public festivals, is a well-documented historical fact. The very celebrations that were meant to reinforce community bonds and religious values often had a dark underbelly, leading to a surge in drinking, violence, and the use of prostitutes. The social release of the carnival was built on the intensified exploitation of women like you. A strange and lesser-known aspect of the carnival was the temporary suspension of certain rules. Sometimes during the festival, the requirement to wear the identifying yellow shawl was lifted. This was not an act of kindness. It was a practical matter. In the chaos of the masked crowds, a single yellow shawl was meaningless, but this temporary freedom was a lie. You were more trapped than ever, confined to the house by the sheer volume of work. You might not have to wear the shawl, but you couldn't step outside anyway. One night, near the end of the week, you are so tired you can barely stand. You look around the main room of the house. You see Isabel forcing a bright, brittle smile for a man in a grinning devil mask. You see Sabine's face, pale and drawn, as she pours another cup of wine who can barely sit upright. You see the debris of the night, but it looks like the night of overturned glasses, discolored wine staining the newly scrubbed floor. It looks like the aftermath of a battle. You retreat to a corner for a moment, just to lean against the wall. Through the open window, you can see the colored lanterns of the festival and hear the distant, happy shouts of the revelers. You feel a profound, soul-crushing sense of alienation. You are in the heart of the city, at the peak of its most vibrant celebration, and you have never felt more alone. The carnival is a party you are not invited to, one that you are forced to serve from the kitchen. The shadow of the carnival is long, and it falls directly on your house. It highlights the brutal truth of your position. You are not a part of the city's life. You are a resource to be consumed by it. When the festival ends, the city will return to its normal, respectable routine, its collective conscience cleansed by the brief period of chaos. But you will be left with the bill, paid for not in coin, but in a deep, weary exhaustion that seems to have settled permanently in your bones. The carnival ends as abruptly as it began. The city wakes up with a collective headache, the streets littered with the debris of celebration. A sense of weary, hungover quiet settles over the house. For a day or two you are allowed a reprieve, a chance to scrub the house and yourselves clean of the festival's grime. But the quiet doesn't last. One afternoon, Madame Melody returns from an outing not alone, but with a girl in tow. She is young. Younger than you were when you arrived. Her eyes are wide with a mixture of terror and bewilderment. She clutches a small, pathetic bundle of belongings, and her dress, a simple country frock, is smudged with the dirt of the road. She is you, 6 months ago. Seeing her is like looking into a distorted mirror, a reflection of your own past. Madame Melody presents her to the house with the same practiced speech she used for you. This as she pauses, inventing a name on the spot, Colette. She will be joining our family. Make her feel welcome. The other women look at the new girl, and there is no welcome in their eyes. There is only a tired, cynical assessment. Isabel sizes her up as new competition. Magda sees another sparrow fallen from the nest, and you see the cycle, laid bare and brutal. You are no longer the new girl. That role has now been passed to Colette. You have, without realizing it, been promoted. You are now one of the regulars, one of the established girls. The transition is seamless and unspoken. You are expected to help show Colette the ropes, just as Magda once showed you. You are the one who leads her up the stairs to the crowded dormitory. You are the one who points to the last empty bed. You are the one who hands her a worn, cast-off dress from the communal trunk. As you do, you hear Magda's words from your own first day echoing in your ears. You find yourself repeating them almost verbatim. Keep your head down. Do what you're already told. Don't believe the promises. The words feel strange and bitter in your mouth. To say them is to acknowledge that you have accepted your place in this world, that you have internalized its cruel logic. You are now a part of the machinery that breaks in the newcomers. The arrival of a new girl was a crucial and regular event in the life of a brothel. The business model depended on a constant supply of fresh faces. Youth and novelty were valuable commodities, and a new girl could reignite the interest of jaded regular clients. This constant influx of new, desperate women also served to keep the existing women in line. It was a clear, unspoken threat: you are all replaceable. A little known but poignant detail from some historical house records is the mentoring system. A new girl would be officially assigned to an older, more experienced woman. On the surface, this was for training. But historians debate its true purpose. Was it a rare form of solidarity? A way for women to pass down survival skills, or was it another of the mechanisms using the older women to indoctrinate the new ones into the house's culture of compliance? Ensuring the cycle of exploitation continued smoothly, your new, unofficial role as Colette's mentor feels very much like the latter. You watch Colette over the next few days as she stumbles through her first encounters, her first lessons in the house's rules. You see the hope in her eyes slowly curdle into fear, then into a guarded watchfulness. You see her learning to force a smile, to retreat into herself. You are watching your own story play out again, but this time you are a supporting character, not the lead. The experience is profoundly numbing. It confirms a suspicion that has been growing in you for months that you are not special. You are just one in a long, unending line of girls who arrive with a dream and are ground down into a function. The house is a machine, and you are all interchangeable parts. When one part wears out, it is simply discarded and replaced with a new one. You see Colette in the dormitory at night, sometimes crying silently into her thin pillow, trying not to wake the others. A part of you wants to go to her to offer some real comfort, some genuine warning. But what could you possibly say? Run? Where would she go? You know better than anyone that the world outside these walls is just as unforgiving. It gets easier, that would be a lie. It doesn't get easier, you just get harder. So you stay in your own bed, listening to her quiet sobs, and you feel a profound and terrifying numbness, a cold detachment that is perhaps the most frightening change in you so far. The arrival of the new girl has not inspired pity in you. It has simply held up a mirror to your own transformation, and you barely recognize the person you become. Time in the house flows like a thick, slow-moving river of tar. The days and nights are so similar that they lose their distinctiveness, blurring into a single, continuous stretch of existence. You measure time not in weeks or months, but in carnivals, in the arrival of new girls, in the faces that come and go. And one morning, You catch a glimpse of your own face in a shard of mirror, and for the first time, you are truly startled by what you see. It's not one single dramatic change. It's a collection of small, subtle alterations. There are faint lines around your eyes that weren't there before, etched by countless forced smiles and sleepless nights. Your skin, once clear, now has a persistent sallowness from the lack of sunlight and fresh air. Your eyes are the biggest shock. The wide-eyed hope and fear of the girl who first arrived has been replaced by a look you recognize from the other women, a deep, profound weariness, a guarded stillness. Your face has become a mask, and you realize with a jolt that it is starting to set. This is the moment of a new kind of fear, not the immediate fear of a violent client or the economic fear of debt. This is a deeper, more existential dread, the fear of your own obsolescence. In your profession, youth is not just an advantage, it is the primary currency. Your value is directly tied to the freshness of your face, the smoothness of your skin. Every day that passes, every new line on your face, is a small depreciation of your worth in the cold, brutal marketplace of the house. You watch Isabel, the house's favored woman, with a new and clinical eye. You see her spending more and more time on her appearance, applying her lead powder with a slightly heavier hand to conceal the small imperfections that time is beginning to bestow. You hear the faint note of desperation in her laughter when she is with a particularly wealthy client. She is fighting a battle she knows she cannot win, a battle against time itself. The economic reality of aging in this life is terrifying. As a woman's perceived desirability wanes, she is given fewer clients, and the ones she is given are often the less desirable, lower-paying ones. Her earnings drop. Her heir to the madam, however, does not. She sinks deeper and deeper into the financial mire. Eventually, she will be moved from the main roster of girls to the background, relegated to the same status as the older, forgotten women you see mending clothes and scrubbing floors. They are the ghosts of this house, specters of your own future. This fear of aging was a constant and powerful source of anxiety. It fueled a desperate and often dangerous market for restorative products. A whole shadow industry of charlatans and back-alley alchemists sold creams and potions that promised to erase wrinkles, lighten skin, and restore a youthful glow. A bizarre and sad example is the use of belladonna or deadly nightshade as eye drops. It would dilate the pupils, creating a wide-eyed, supposedly alluring look. It also, of course, blurred vision and was, as the name implies, highly toxic. Women would risk their sight for the temporary illusion of youth. The question of what ultimately happened to these women as they grew older is one of the most tragic and difficult for historians to answer. The records are mostly silent. Some may have simply died from illness or the cumulative toll of the life. Some may have been turned out of the house and become street beggars. A very few might have saved enough to eke out a meager existence as a laundress or a seamstress, their past a closely guarded secret. The most cynical and perhaps most common outcomes, some of the most ruthless and intelligent ones, like Madame, managed to graduate from being a worker to being a manager, thus perpetuating the very system that had consumed their own youth. The debate on whether most madams were former prostitutes themselves is still active, with evidence pointing in both directions depending on the specific time and place. You look at your reflection again. You try to see the girl you were, the girl who arrived in the city clutching a locket and a dream. You can still see traces of her, but she is fading, like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. You are being replaced by this new person, this Annalise, whose face is becoming a roadmap of her experiences. That night, you lie in bed and feel a panic colder and sharper than any you have felt before. It's the panic of a merchant watching his most valuable goods slowly spoil on the shelf. Your youth is slipping through your fingers like sand, and you have nothing to show for it but a growing debt and a face that is beginning to tell a story you never wanted to write. For months, you have lived under a fragile, unspoken truce with your reality. You understand the rules, the debts, the hierarchies. You have accepted the grim logic of this world because on some level, you have clung to the foundational promise that brought you here: protection. The house with its laws and ledgers is a cage, yes, but you believed it was a cage that shielded you from the far greater dangers of the world outside. It is a lie you have told yourself so many times that it has become a kind of truth. Tonight, that lie will be burned away. The evening starts like any other. The main room is warm, filled with the low murmur of conversation and the clinking of wine cups. A wealthy textile merchant, a regular named Master Valeries, is holding court at his usual table. He is a man accustomed to getting what he wants, both in business and in leisure. He is loud, but he pays well, so Madame Melody fawns over him. Tonight, he beckons to Sabine. Your friend, who has grown more confident but has never lost the gentle kindness in her eyes, goes to his table. A short while later, they go upstairs. The house settles back into its rhythm, but not for long. A raised voice drifts down the staircase. Master Valerie's S, sharp with anger. Then you hear Sabine's voice, high and pleading. A door slams open. The argument spills out into the hallway above. Thieving little witch. Valerie's bellows, his voice echoing in the sudden silence of the room below. Everyone freezes. Clients look up from their wine. The women exchange nervous glances. No, I swear it, sir, Sabine cries. It was the price we agreed upon. Madame Melody's face becomes a stone mask. She moves to the bottom of the stairs, her expression not one of concern for Sabine, but of pure, cold damage control. Master Valerie, she calls up, her voice tight but still respectful. Is there a problem? This creature tried to short me, he roars. Then comes a sound that cuts through the air, sharp and ugly. It is the sound of a hand striking flesh. It is followed by a choked cry from Sabine. A wave of sickness washes over you. You seem eyed to flinch. Even Isabella's practiced composure cracks for a second. Master Valerie stomps down the stairs, his face purple with rage. Sabine follows a few steps behind, her hand pressed to her cheek, a bright red mark already blooming there. Tears stream down her face, but it's the look of utter, bewildered shock in her eyes that tears at you, and then you witness the great betrayal. Madame Melody does not look at Sabine. She directs all her attention to the furious merchant. My deepest apologies, Master Valeries, she says, her voice smooth as oil. The girl is new to your ways. She is foolish. She will be punished severely for upsetting you. Please allow me to pour you our finest brandy on the house. She is apologizing to him. She is siding with the man who just struck her employee, her family member. In that moment, the first layer of the illusion of protection peels away. Madame Melody does not protect her girls. She protects her business. She protects her profits. You are assets, and if an asset is damaged in the process of pleasing a wealthy client, it is the asset's fault. The guards, drawn by the commotion, appear at the door, but they do not bring justice. They see the wealthy merchant, a pillar of the local guild. They see the madam. They see a crying prostitute. The calculation in their eyes is instantaneous. They listen to Valerie's blustering account, nodding with deference. One of them turns to Sabine and says, You learn to show respect, girl. You're lucky. That's all you got for causing trouble. They did not protect her. They reinforced her subjugation. And there it is, the entire lie exposed and rotting in the middle of the room. The registration at City Hall. The weekly inspections. The yellow shawl. The guards on patrol. None of it was ever for your safety. It was all a system designed to make men like Master Valeries feel safe while they exploited you. It was a legal framework to ensure that if you were harmed, you had no recourse. Your official, registered status didn't give you rights, it stripped you of them. You now understand a harsh legal reality you never knew existed. In the eyes of the law, as a public woman, your testimony is considered inherently unreliable, especially against a propertied citizen. This was a real principle in many historical legal systems where certain people were deemed infamous, and their word held little to no weight in court. The very act of being registered and marked, which was presented as a shield, was in fact a legal declaration that your word was worthless. Historians still argue about whether this power imbalance was absolute. Were there any circumstances under which a woman in your position could find justice, or were there rare recorded cases of a prostitute winning a legal claim simply instances where her owner's financial interests, perhaps against an unpaying or less influential client, happened to align with hers? Looking at Sabine's tear-streaked face and the guard's dismissive shrugs, you know the answer. Justice is a luxury you cannot afford. The incident is over in minutes. Master Valeries is placated and leaves without paying. The guards depart. Madame Melody turns her fury on Sabine, not for being hurt, but for costing her a valuable client. You stand there frozen as a cold, hard clarity settles in your soul. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as intended. It protects the buyers, not the sellers. It protects the powerful, not the weak. The protection was never for you. It was from you. And that is the most brutal truth of all. The incident with Sabine changes the atmosphere in the house. A layer of pretense has been stripped away, leaving the raw, ugly truth exposed. The forced laughter is a little more brittle, the smiles a little more strained. A quiet, desperate anger simmers beneath the surface. And in that fertile ground of disillusionment, a dangerous seed takes root, the idea of escape. It doesn't start with you. It starts with a girl named Elise who has been at the house a little longer than you. She has always been quiet, but with a fierce, defiant spark in her eyes. You've seen her watching the back wall, the small yard behind the house, a wall that is high, but perhaps not impossibly so. The talk begins in whispers in the dead of night, in the relative privacy of the dormitory. At first, it's just fantasy. If I had a rope, if the back gate was left unlocked, but with Elise, it slowly hardens from a dream into a plan. A desperate, half-baked, and incredibly dangerous plan. She tries to recruit you. One night, she corners you by the washouts. Elise, she whispers, her voice urgent. I'm going. There's a loose board in the back fence. During the changing of the guard, there's a 5-minute window. We could be gone. Your heart pounds. Freedom. The word itself is a jolt of electricity. To walk out of here, to shed the name analyzed, to take off the yellow shawl and never put it back on, to own your own body, your own time. The temptation is immense. But then the cold logic of your reality crashes down. Run where you have no money, save for the few pathetic coins you've managed to hide. You have no family to run to, no friends on the outside. You are a registered woman. Your description is in a book at the city hall. If you were caught, what would happen? This is the ultimate checkmate of the system. Even if you could physically escape the house, you can't escape the identity the city has assigned you. A runaway prostitute was a criminal. She was not a victim seeking freedom, she was stolen property. Madame Melody would report her asset missing, and the city guard would be on the lookout. The punishments for captured runaways were severe, designed to be a deterrent to others. A woman could be publicly whipped, have her head shaved to mark her with even greater shame, or be sentenced to a long term in a brutal workhouse or a penal hospital. The system did not tolerate rebellion. It had to make an example of those who tried to break the rules. There is a fierce debate among historians about the frequency and success rates of escape attempts. Official records, like police blotters, mostly document the failures the women who were caught and punished. The successful escapes, by their very nature, would leave no record. How many women simply vanished into the teeming anonymity of a big city or managed to make their way to a new town and a new life we will likely never know. These unwritten stories are a tantalizing but frustrating gap in the historical narrative. You look at Elise's face, alive with a desperate, feverish hope. You think of your small, hidden stash, the scraps of paper with your real name, the little wooden bird. They are symbols of a private, internal freedom. Elise is trying to make that freedom real. It's a beautiful, terrifying thought. A moth flying straight towards a candle flame. I can't, you whisper back to her, and the words taste like ash in your mouth. It's too dangerous. She looks at you, and the spark in her eyes dims with contempt. So you'll just stay here forever, you'll just become one of them, she hisses, gesturing to the older, forgotten women of the house. She turns and leaves you, and you feel like a coward. But you also feel a cold certainty that you have made the only rational choice. Your spirit may dream of flight, but your body knows the height of the fall. A few nights later, Elise makes her move. You are all in the dormitory, the house quiet. You see her slip out of her bed, a small bundle in her hand. She gives one last, fleeting look around the room, a look of both fear and triumph. Then she is gone, a ghost slipping out the door. You lie awake for what feels like hours, your ears straining, waiting for the sound of a shout, of a struggle, of her being dragged back. But there is only silence, a profound, hopeful, terrifying silence. Maybe she made it. Maybe the moth reached the stars instead of the flame. The thought is a small, dangerous comfort. The next morning, Madame Melody discovers she is gone. Her fury is cold and immense. She sends for the guard immediately. An example must be made. The hunt is on. And every woman in the house now knows the price of trying. The house is a tightly wound spring in the days following Eliza's escape. Madame Melody's anger manifests as a chilling, oppressive silence. Privileges are revoked. The already meager meals become even more so. Every woman is watched, her every move scrutinized. You are all being punished for the actions of one. The collective punishment is a powerful tool. It turns you against the memory of Eliza, making her act of defiance seem like a selfish betrayal of the rest of you. 2 weeks pass. The tension begins to ease slightly. A new, fragile normality starts to settle in. A part of you, the part that treasures the wooden bird, allows itself to believe that Eliza made it, that she is free somewhere, living a new life. It's a secret, vicarious victory. Then one afternoon, the victory turns to ash. A city guard, not one of the usual patrol men, but a sergeant from the magistrate's office, arrives at the door. He speaks in a low voice to Madame Melody. You see her nod, her face impassive, and then she calls for Magda. Get a cart, is all she says. A short while later, the cart arrives. It is a plain, flat-bedded dray, the kind used for hauling sacks of grain or firewood. And on the back of the cart is a body, wrapped in a coarse canvas sheet. They bring her into the small backyard, the same yard she had planned to escape from, and lay her on the damp cobblestones. Madame Melody, cold and businesslike, pulls back the sheet. You and the other women are made to file past to look. This is not a warning. This is a lesson. She was found, they say, in a ditch by the river on the outskirts of the city. There are no marks of violence on her. She had no money, no food. She likely succumbed to exposure and starvation. Her desperate flight to freedom ended here, just a few miles from her cage, in a cold, lonely ditch. Her dream of a new life lasted only as long as the meager strength in her body. You look at her face, pale and empty. The fierce, defiant spark that had defined her is gone. There is only a profound, tragic stillness. This is the reality of a moth flying to the flame. This is the consequence of believing in a hope that this world is not designed to fulfill. What happens to the bodies of women like Eliza? It's a grim footnote in the historical record. If they were registered and had an owner like Madame Melody, the owner was responsible for the burial. This was often done as cheaply as possible, in an unmarked grave in a potter's field, the section of the cemetery reserved for the poor and the unknown. There would be no ceremony, no stone, no name to mark the spot, just another anonymous soul returning to the earth. The final debate for historians is whether this care was a final act of humanity, or simply the brothel owner fulfilling the last of her legal obligations to dispose of unwanted property. You look away from Eliza's body and your eyes fall on the high stone wall at the back of the yard. The wall that had, for a brief time, represented a gateway to freedom. Now it looks different. It looks like a tombstone. You return to the house, your legs feeling heavy, as if they are made of lead. The other women are silent, their faces pale and drawn. The lesson has been brutally, effectively taught. The last, flickering embers of rebellion have been extinguished, doused by the cold reality of Eliza's fate. That night you don't sleep. You slip your hand under the loose floorboard beneath your bed. Your fingers find the small wooden bird. You hold it in your palm, its carved wings feeling sharp against your skin. For weeks, it has been a symbol of hope, of flight, of a world beyond these walls. Now it feels like a child's toy, a foolish, naive fantasy. You think of the river, the wide, dark, indifferent water that flows through the city, carrying its secrets and its refuse out to the sea. It flows on, day after day, night after night. It does not care about the city, about the house, about the women inside it. It simply moves forward, relentlessly, towards an unknown destination. You feel something inside you shift. The anger, the fear, the faint glimmers of hope, they all begin to recede, washed away by a great, cold tide of resignation. The fight has gone out of you. You cannot escape. You can only endure. You become like the river. You will flow. You will move through the days and nights. You will reflect the light of the candles in the darkness of the night. But you will wear a smooth, untroubled surface while whatever is left of your true self, your real name, sinks deep, deep down to the riverbed, where no one can ever touch it again. You will move forward, day after day, the silent, anonymous current, flowing towards whatever end awaits you. There is only the current. And so, the current carries you. The edges of your world, once so sharp and painful, begin to soften and blur. The faces of the men, the sound of Madame Melodious keys, the scratch of the yellow shore, they all fade into a monotonous background hum, like the sound of a distant fan on a warm, still night. The struggle has ceased, and in its place, a strange, deep quiet has settled in your soul. You are no longer fighting the river, you are simply floating upon it. You feel a gentle sense of drift, a weightlessness that is almost peaceful. The hard court in the dormitory seems to melt away, replaced by something softer, warmer. The low murmur of the house fades, and you can almost hear the sound of wind rustling through leaves, a sound from a life you once knew. You feel yourself sinking, not into despair, but into a deep, deep state of rest, the kind of rest that comes after a long, impossible journey. The tension in your shoulders loosens. The knot of anxiety in your stomach finally unwinds. Your breathing slows, becoming deep and even, a gentle tide rising and falling in the stillness of the night. You are drifting now on a calm, dark water under a sky with no stars. There is no past to haunt you, no future to fear. There is only this moment. This quiet, this gentle, effortless drift into the soft, welcoming darkness of sleep. Let the river carry you now. Let it rock you gently. Let it take you into the peaceful oblivion of your dreams. The end of the article. Good night.